COVID-19 in our province. This is no small feat and serves as a good reminder of what we can achieve by working together. As long as we remain disciplined and focused, we will continue to do well with keeping this virus at bay. Our public health officials are continually monitoring COVID-19 globally, and the actions we take are based on the best available evidence. As this pandemic evolves, we will too, in order to ensure we are prepared and ready to respond to potential future outbreaks in our communities. The health and safety of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians will always be our #1 priority. Each day during the media briefings, I continue to emphasize the importance of staying at home, particularly when feeling unwell, practicing proper hand hygiene and cough and sneeze etiquette, and maintaining safe physical distance from others. Just as this message has become repetitive, I hope so too these actions, because they remain our first line of defense against COVID-19, and I cannot overstate enough their importance. As we head into the long weekend, please continue to be mindful and follow public health orders in place. Our actions and behaviors this weekend will determine what COVID-19 will look like in our province in the next 2 weeks. And while the traditions this year will be different, this does not mean you cannot enjoy time outside or inside, depending on the weather, with members of your double bubble and virtually with other family members and friends. Enjoy a backyard fire with members of your bubble. Share your musical talents online, or take the time to call a friend. No matter your plans this weekend, may you find time to sit back and relax with those closest to you, find comfort in knowing you are doing your part to keep others safe, and find positives in every day while creating new and lasting memories. The time will come again when we will be able to reunite with family and friends to carry on the traditions we know and love, but that time is not now. I know it is not easy, and this pandemic may feel insurmountable at times, but our hard work and unwavering commitment has gotten us to where we are today, and we should be incredibly proud and grateful in knowing just how far we will go to keep one another safe. It is this continued dedication to do what is right that will give us the strength and resilience we need to overcome COVID-19 in our province. And I know as long as we continue to focus our efforts towards our common goal, we will succeed in this endeavor. Hold fast, Newfoundland and Labrador. And please stay in your bubble and stay safe this holiday weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And Dr. Fitzgerald says that with a big smile on her face today. And make no wonder, day 8 with no new cases. We have officially cleared a full week with no cases of COVID-19 in Newfoundland and Labrador. This is a message that never gets boring. It's always welcome news. That's the reason to remain positive. However, we must not think that we're totally in the clear. And Dr. Fitzgerald has said on so many times that the virus is not going away, unfortunately, anytime soon. It's still here, it lives amongst us, and we've done a good job in stopping the spread, a good job in keeping it at bay, and by practicing good hygiene and physical distancing. So a thumbs up for all of you and your olive efforts over the last few months. You've done some great work together. Let's continue down this path because we know that it's working. There's been a lot of discussion around people about entering the province. I get questions related to this all the time. And since May 4th, you might be interested to know that there's been over 2,000 travel exemptions requests that's been put in place. And I want to recognize the hard work of our public health officials who have been very busy turning them around very quickly. A number of people that would have been entering in our province in the last 24 hours is always something, again, that people are interested in. So over the last 24 hours, we've had 217 people that have come across or come into Newfoundland and Labrador. And this calculation are the numbers that will come in through all our entry points. Many of them would have been arriving either to or leaving for work. And similar to what we see, many of those would be residents that would leave here on their way or coming home from Alberta. Today, the Prime Minister announced again that the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is being extended for another 3 months. However, this has been a great program, and it will now be extended till August, so that businesses can rehire staff and expand where possible. So this is really about keeping employees on their business payrolls. And over the next month, government will continue to work with businesses and labor on adjustments to this program, including the 30% threshold for eligibility. Also today, the Canada Child Benefit and GST and HST credit will not be cut off for people who have missed the June 1st tax filing date. Of course, we urge everyone to file your taxes on time, but says that benefits will not be automatically discontinued until the end of September for those who missed the June 1st deadline. Also related to academic research today, the Prime Minister has announced some $450 million in new supports for Canada's academic research community so that the researchers can keep their jobs, safeguard their research, and continue their critical work after this crisis. So with all of this, it's been a very busy week for our all-party committee. We continue to meet every single morning. Our Canada's premiers, we meet every week. And then the Prime Minister, we meet every week. And, of course, our ministers in our own cabinet and our MHAs, all busy putting supports and resources in place for you during this pandemic. Now, yesterday, we did announce financial measures for electricity customers, where over $50 million is being made available for electricity customers who have been impacted by COVID-19. Now, there's been some discussion in social media and beyond about some people suggesting that there is an administrative fee. So I want you to note that Newfoundland Power will not be collecting any fees from customers or will not be receiving any financial benefit for the administration of the programs that we announced yesterday. Those programs, number one, was a measure to put a one-time credit on electricity bills for residential and general service customers. And the second announcement yesterday, just to remind everyone, was $2.5 million to waive the interest on the overdue accounts. No administration fees for Newfoundland Power on these programs. A number of questions I've been getting to, which would be around schools, and you've heard me say sometime now that it's unlikely that schools will reopen for this school year. This morning, Minister War officially announced that schools will remain closed for the current school year. The pandemic has certainly created a situation that none of us would ever have anticipated, and jurisdictions all over the world are finding ways to adapt. What's important to remember to all of us is that while in-school instruction has been canceled, at-home learning opportunities, that will still continue. Teachers will continue their engagement with students using a variety of online teaching methods. So if you're wondering about what your kids are doing on their laptops, well, they're probably in Google Classroom or Google Meet, but it never hurts to actually check and see what's going on. So this new resource of at-home learning presents a real opportunity for students to improve their final grades, and this is always a good thing. So as we look forward to the new school year in September, we know that a plan is being developed. This plan will include instructions that will encompass a various number of options depending on how the pandemic presents itself at this time. So a number of scenarios are being explored. It's also important to note that school districts will issue report cards. They will be issued on the week of June the 22nd. And on July the 6th, the week of July the 6th, the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, well, they will issue the transcripts. Now, for students who need credit rescue or credit recovery, their options continue to be available to alleviate any negative impact on high school students, particularly those that are graduating or transitioning to some form of post-secondary education. So this option is available to you. Now, speaking of students that are graduating, if we weren't in this pandemic, this would have been a big weekend for a lot of grade 12 students across the province. For many, it would have been their prom weekend. We know that this is a difficult time as you've worked hard on graduating from high school and looking forward to this big day. A lot of you have already bought your prom dresses and your grad suits in anticipation of celebrating this very special day. So although you cannot celebrate as planned, don't let the pandemic stop you. Think outside the box. I've seen a lot of great videos from students who plan on getting all dressed up for a virtual graduation. So be creative, be social, and most of all, have some fun. To the graduating class of 2020, this is your time and you deserve it. So on behalf of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, congratulations on you that are shutting the door on one chapter of your life, but opening a new door on what will be a new, exciting chapter of your life. And when you look back on history, you will be forever remembered, the class that graduated during COVID-19. So as school clues up for another year, it's typical that students look for summer work. So aside from working with the school districts to make sure measures are in place for continuing education and to support students through this pandemic, just a few hours ago, Minister Mitchell announced some $300,000 in funding to launch a new Student Supporting Communities program. This is a new program in addition to the provincial student program that was announced earlier this year. So this new program will provide a $3,500 grant to organizations to help them hire students. Students who in turn will work with seniors and other vulnerable groups who face social isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we recognize that physical distancing and isolation can take a toll on mental health. This is especially true for seniors and the vulnerable members of our community who are already at a heightened risk of loneliness and depression. So staying connected has never been more important, and having the supports of students in this new program is a creative way to increase social interaction. The call for applications from employers, including organizations, is now open today on Friday. So for further information, you can visit the Advanced Education Skills and Labor website. And as you know, as we move now into Alert Level 4, there's been a lot of questions on what it means for businesses and workplace. We get those questions all the time. And the questions will be around what it means to them as they begin to reopen. So for businesses and workplaces, if you have questions, go to the website of COVID-19. That website is a very busy website. Go in there. You will see information on the business and employee editing. And if you continue on working through that page, you'll see all kinds of guidance and information sheets, even specifically designed for your business. So keep your eyes on the website. It's updated regularly with this new information. This new information is especially important as Dr. Fitzgerald continues to make changes through public health measures. And this weekend might be a good opportunity to log in and just refresh yourselves on what these changes actually mean to you. And speaking of this weekend, I want to wish you all a very happy and a very safe May the 24th. I understand this will look a lot different for many of you. So we must think of ways that we can adjust. And although you may even be heading to your cabin, please do so in the safest manner possible. Do not socialize outside your bubble. And perhaps you could even consider bringing some food so you can reduce the number of stops along the way. And please make sure you keep road safety in mind. Keep your speed down. If you're driving, stay off the phone. And of course, watch for moose. While we keep physical distancing between us this long weekend, let's not put the social distance between us. There is a difference between physical distancing and social distancing. And more than ever, we need one another. We do not need to disconnect ourselves from family and friends. This is a lonely and a stressful time for many of us in our province. We need to be social. Every bit of social contact can make people feel connected. So this will be a busy weekend for many, and over this weekend, as usual, on Saturday and on Sunday, we will issue the numbers, overnight numbers, through media release, as we typically do. And on Saturday and Sunday, as I said, they will be updated at 2 o'clock. And likewise, because this is a long weekend, we will do the same thing on Monday. And we look forward to being back here at Tuesday at this place at 2 p.m. So until then, stay safe, everyone. Practice good hygiene and physical distancing, and please take care. Right now, I would turn it over to Minister Haggie for his comments today.
Thank you very much, Premier. And again, another good day with no new cases. So that's a great way to start our holiday weekend. Over the last few events like this, I've made reference occasionally to persons with disabilities. And indeed today, Minister Dempster and myself met virtually with the Association for Community Living and the chair of the Network of Persons with Disabilities, part of a group we have established across government to help folk in that situation navigate. We've discussed individual situations around shopping and these kind of things, but I think the emphasis on today's discussion was very much around the interactions of persons with disabilities with the healthcare system. We clarified with them around the need for a support person to be included with visits for people, particularly with communication difficulties. But again, it wasn't really diagnosis specific. We'll be clarifying with the RHAs to make sure that the intent of that was clear. For those people who were admitted, where there's discussion around patient care team, I think one of the things that may have come as a bit of a surprise to the groups was that the patient and their support worker are indeed actually a formal part of the patient care team. And I think that inclusion of them in the decision-making processes about their own care is a crucial piece of inclusion and empowerment. We also got on to the slightly thornier subject of ICU triage. That's the situation where if we have a resurgence and that resurgence is more of a stress on the system, and we find ourselves having to go down a road that, say, Quebec and Italy went down, where resources are limited, we made it perfectly clear that our framework was designed around clinical principles and was not meant to be in any way interpreted as being exclusive. And I think that was a very good discussion, and certainly Minister Dempster and I were very impressed with the discussion that we had with them. The other elements of my comments today are really around information, and the Premier has referenced around the business response team. Our website is updated regularly from the health point of view, both with Dr. Fitzgerald's orders, any exemptions there, the requirements under those exemptions, and any appeal processes around travel. One of the challenges we have in this era of instant social media is that it is very easy for a rumour to go round the province twice while truth is putting his shoes on. And that has happened on several occasions over the course of this pandemic. And again, seems to have happened yesterday and the day before with apparent issues around out-of-province people coming into the province without due process. Well, again, perception isn't always everything. There was due process. Each of those people without a province license plate had a valid reason from a public health point of view for being in the province, and due process was followed. And I want to use that to reassure people that there is a system in place at the ferry as at all points of entry. Furthering that, I had discussions yesterday with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police today to get their take on how things are going. They are universally impressed with the level of cooperation and compliance from Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and feel that the tools they have are more than sufficient for the job. And we have clear policies now for those rare occasions, should they arise, when people feel constrained to ignore public health orders, which now have the force of law. And I'm confident that over the next little while, that should become a non-issue. Obviously, for those people who are concerned, there are those report forms. They are being investigated, and reports are received by my department on a regular basis, as well as Justice and Public Safety. So again, we got an excellent start to what is traditionally the start of the holiday season in Newfoundland and Labrador. But I would caution you, in the same way Dr. Fitzgerald has, that we don't want to rush ahead for fear of wrecking the process and the benefits that we've reaped with hard work over the last 7 or 8 weeks. So stay in your bubble, protect your bubble, respect everybody else's bubble, and within those bubbles, have a really good holiday weekend, and we'll meet again, as they say, next week. So thank you very much, Premier. I'll turn it back to you now.
Well, thank you, Minister, and I will now open it up to the media for questions for today.
Thank you, Premier. For the benefit of our speakers, we have 6 reporters registered for today's call. The reporters will each have an opportunity to ask 2 questions and 1 follow-up. We suggest that you not ask rumor-based questions. The purpose of these briefings is to address COVID-19 issues. All other government-related issues should be directed to the appropriate department or agency for response. Reporters will ask questions in the order they registered for today's call. Please do not press *1 until your name has been called. Following this, should time permit, there will be an opportunity for single questions. This call will end at 2:59 p.m. and further questions can be emailed. Our first questions today are from Kellyanne Roberts of NTV News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This morning we heard that students here in the province won't be going back for the remainder of the school year. This is for K-12. Dr. Fitzgerald, what's your medical opinion on back to classes this September?
So, as I've said before, when the time comes to consider that, we'll have to look at not just our epidemiology here, but epidemiology elsewhere, what the situation is like going on elsewhere in the world. And we'll make our decisions regarding the safety of children going back to school, or not our decisions, but our recommendation regarding the children going back to school at that time.
So whether the schools themselves, in terms of the physical structures, are open, one of the things that the school district will be doing now is working on a number of scenarios, because as I mentioned in my remarks, it's hard to determine, to forecast in September where this virus will be. So it's important now that the school district will work on a number of options, including continuing to educate our K-12 systems, online. So it's hard to determine, forecast where this will be. As the chief medical officer has said, that's the reason why the school district will look at a number of scenarios.
Thank you. And Dr. Fitzgerald, we've heard of some of the first antibody studies being done in Canada now, convalescent plasma being one of them that's being done in Atlantic Canada. Where are we in setting up a system like that here? Is there a time frame, and how important is it that we develop a similar system?
So if you're talking about antibody testing, that's a test that we do to see if people have antibodies to the virus, and certainly on the whole, on a national level, we're working on that. There's actually a task group that's looking at that question and how we can use it best in the health system here in Canada, and certainly our lab, public health lab here, is participating in that process. If you're talking about convalescent plasma for treatment, that's a different thing, and that's using plasma from people who've been sick to try to help people who have been sick and recovered. They donate their plasma to try to help people who recover who are now sick. So that process is a little out of my range. That's for treatment of acute care. It's not really a public health question.
Okay. And I'm also wondering, in terms of the education plan, what's being done for substitute teachers that may not have met the EI claims, and now with the shorter school year and with CERB only lasting 16 weeks, where does this all fall?
Yeah, so that, there's some concerns that, substitute teachers and many of those and by the way, there's just not substitute teachers that did not get time in substituting in the classroom. There's a number of people that would have been, teaching on a part-time, as a part-time position, and yet they would use substitute teaching as an increment to their salary. So, there's an important, consideration and discussions that are ongoing with the NLTA and with the school districts and with the department, of course, and with the federal programs in mind. So, there is money in the budget, of course, to support substitute teachers, but right now that work will continue with the NLTA and with the department and the officials at the school districts to see, what is available with the federal programs in mind for substitute teachers.
Thank you.
Our next questions are from Peter Callan of CBC News. Please go ahead.
Minister Haggie, we talked to a woman whose fiancé has been in the hospital for 6 weeks with a stroke. She hasn't been able to go in and see him, so she can't help with things like rehabilitation or advocate for him because he has a number of deficits because of the stroke. Why not allow visitors for people who maybe have more severe health problems and have prolonged stays in hospital?
Thanks, Peter. These have been very difficult decisions around restrictions of visitors, and they were made on the basis of safety for all concerned and public health advice. It actually ties in a way with some of my earlier comments about persons with disabilities. If someone is disabled to some degree as a result of an illness, which is now a semi-permanent state of affairs, then obviously that needs to be factored in to their care and their care plan, and their caregiver would be identified and should be brought into the conversation. But again, it is a challenge as to how to do this in a way that both respects the needs of the patient, the wishes of the caregiver, and the concerns about infection prevention and control. There is no easy answer to this, and I suspect that we will start to see more of these kind of cases. And certainly it's a discussion we will need to have with the regional health authorities to ensure that where there are situations like that, there are mechanisms to address those concerns. But this is an evolving situation. It's one that will be with us for longer than any of us want. So I think it's a timely discussion that we need to have with the RHA.
Thank you. A question for the Premier. The federal government has plans to open at least sort of hiking trails and other public spaces and parks on June 1st. What's the plan for provincial parks?
Yeah, so this was part of our discussion last night with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister and other premiers. So the plan from the federal side would be to coordinate with what's happening here within the province. So there's no final determination on what parks would be open. They would only do that in conjunction with the provincial park program here in Newfoundland and Labrador. So the final decision, working with the parks and determining what alert level that would be, they could be open, those final decisions are not made yet.
And an education question. With the school year now officially canceled in terms of in-class instruction, principals have told parents to expect online learning, but that teachers aren't expected to do online instruction. Can you explain the difference here and why that parents are being told that?
Yeah, so what we've asked with NLTA, with the school district now, is to make plans for, as I said earlier, about a number of different scenarios, that we could find ourselves in September. Some of this might include professional development, PD time, for teachers between now and September. Some of that, could potentially happen within a matter of weeks or so, just so we try and plan as best we can for whatever scenario we presents ourselves. We know that there's been an assessment that would have been done with students, and some 4,000 students would have needed some support with, some technology things like, laptops or iPads or so on. Some 2,500 of those have been supported already, and the remaining 1,500 would be supported as well. There's also analysis that's been done on connectivity, and some 274, I think, householders right now that would not be available will need some extra support. So there's quite a bit of work, as you can tell, that's being done with the planning for September. Some of that will have to include teachers who might need some professional development to actually participate in online training.
Thank you.
Our next questions are from Marie Isabelle Rochon of Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
You keep saying that the Department of Education is working with different scenarios. Can you give us more detail about those scenarios?
Well, the scenarios could be, for instance, how many students, if indeed schools could get partially opened up, the length of the school day, or, if it's completely online, what supports would be required. All of this will be determined and working in conjunction with the public health officials. So right now, the school will be, they're open. They need to explore whatever scenarios that are available to them. And this is where, because we really can't forecast where this virus is going to be. So, as a result of the decisions that we made later from public health officials, the school board must be ready to adjust in whatever the reality is in September. Students and the education system has been under a lot of stress this year. And I want to compliment the teachers for the work that they've done, but also for the parents and the students themselves who've got through what's been a difficult year weather-wise and with this pandemic. So now they're ready to adjust. They're used to working in extreme conditions, and I'm sure they'll be ready for September, whatever the school year will look like.
Thank you. I'm also wondering, so you keep saying that there's a possible second wave of case of COVID-19 coming to Newfoundland, with the border being closed. Where does the government get those facts? On which facts are they based?
So
those are.
Yeah, go ahead, Minister, or the. But I mean, I think what you're asking for is where the prediction would come from what a second wave would look like. You know, the minister and Dr. Fitzgerald would be better equipped than I would. What we need to do as a government is be prepared just in case this second wave comes. So I'll now turn it over to the minister. I'm sure you'll be able to give us some better information on why they are predicting a second wave.
Well, on the real macro level, the World Health Organization are essentially saying this virus will be around for at least 2 more years and are not very optimistic about the effectiveness of a virus. Set against that, on a local level, we have Dr. Rahman's group looking at predictive analytics. They have meetings on a regular basis. And in the middle of that is Public Health Agency of Canada, who also have access to province aggregate data. And each of these models, regardless of public health measures, predicts a second wave. The public health measures predict or can be factored in to show how severe that second wave will be. So the short answer is that the virus is here anyway. The longer answer is that the more we move around, the more we interact, and the freer our borders become sooner, the more likely is that wave will come earlier. And the earlier it comes, the more likely it is to be larger than smaller. These are all vague. There is no certainty in this. This is all mathematical modeling. And I think for anybody who's really looking for certainty in this, you're out of luck.
Thank you. And my last question is a bit related to that. So with the border being closed, nobody can enter in the province, but residents of Newfoundland can still travel outside the province. What do you have to say to people who are making plans of traveling in other Canadian provinces this summer?
So our message has
Think
been...
twice. Sorry, Jen.
Yeah, our message has been to vacation close to home. We want you to stay, within your bubble and to try to physically distance as best you can, and to keep your vacations as close to home as possible. The more you move, the further you move, especially if you go to places where there are higher levels of prevalence of this virus in the communities, the higher risk you are of contracting the virus, or you have of contracting the virus, and then the higher risk of bringing it back to Newfoundland and Labrador when you come home. So, our advice would be definitely to vacation close to home, and I think that's everybody's advice across the country this year.
We've got a lot of great options to explore and vacation in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we have a tremendous amount of, exciting things that people can see, and lots of things that people that actually lived there for years have never experienced within Newfoundland and Labrador. So I'd encourage people, if you're going to vacation, if you're wondering what to do, there's lots of options in our province. And as Dr. Fitzgerald said, many other provinces, by the way, are doing something that is very similar. I know on calls that I've had this week with the Atlantic Province's Premier, even though there's talks about expanding the borders, if indeed when it's safe to do so, it's always with that caveat. All of them are putting in place to have staycations within their own province. And that seemed to be the theme on our call last night with other provinces as well. So people are very cautious. We want them to be responsible. A lot of great things to see and do in Newfoundland and Labrador. So let's take this opportunity to do just that.
Our next questions are from Holly Mackenzie Suter of the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Operator, is Holly Mackenzie on the line?
She needs to press star 1. Please go ahead. Hello?
Hi, Holly.
Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, sorry about that. I'm wondering how much money has been spent or set aside for devices for students in the transition to online learning?
There's I can't tell you the exact number, but we have some provisions within the contingency plan that we put in place a few weeks ago. So there is money available in place. We need to be able to support students. I guess I would like to let some people in the province know too. There's been some questions through our all-party committee around when we've been able to close off the 1920 the 2019-2020 budget, And I know officials at finance are looking at either, if not this week, but the week after. So within 2 weeks, you'll see us as a province, close off the last year. It ended up very weak, but on provisions that we would need to make for those that would need supports through education, we will have money available to support those students as well.
Okay, so I guess as a follow-up, if school is online in September, imagine that, it would be a lot more structured and incorporate graded work and that kind of thing. So is it, realistic to expect that the students that are still waiting for technical support will have it in place in September?
Yeah, for sure. So when I just mentioned, the numbers I gave you those, in a previous answer there, so there's quite a bit of work that's been done already. So some 90, I think it was around 97% of the students already have the necessary equipment that they would have available to them to participate in some online education format. We need to work with teachers, as we just said already. So we're a long ways down this road already with the equipment that would be required, but the job then was to make sure that other students, those last, 3 or 4% that would be left, that we can support them. And in some cases, it will even mean putting in those MiFi networks, in their homes so they can actually be supported.
Great, thanks. And on the student summer program that was announced today, I wonder if there's a deadline for applications in that program and if the 30 weeks need to take place over the summer.
Yeah, so not sure what the deadline would be. I know the applications are open today to some $300,000, a new program. That's in addition to what we've announced, I think it was in February this year, and in addition to the programs that's been announced by the federal government. So the objective here is to get as many students employed in the province as possible this year, taking advantage of either the federal or the provincial program. This one today is a little unique. It gets people working with employees or organizations within our community to help support seniors or some of the most vulnerable. So this is a new program, and I'm looking forward to seeing this unfold within our communities.
Our next questions are from Andrew Robinson of the Telegram. Please go ahead.
Thank you. A number of measures have been introduced, particularly at a federal level, things like topping up OAS and the child care benefits to help people who may be needing extra financial help to get through these times. I wonder whether there's been any particular conversation at a provincial level about the income support program. I know I'm speaking with someone recently, a person with a disability, who makes use of income support and also federal disability pension benefits. She felt that there's increased costs right now, particularly with regards to groceries, and she feels that in her community there could be a need for additional financial support, but she hasn't seen that out there yet, particular.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, whether there's been any conversation on income support.
So I think there's conversations that would be ongoing in the advanced education, skills and labor, that department who looks after income support within our province. We know that there's been some federal supports that would have been there to, help people. And these are people that sometimes, that find themselves having, in hardship as well, just in travel, just getting to and from, appointments when they need to be reopened and so on. I know, in the past, if, within the public transit system with Air and St. John's, there were bus, passes that would have been included and supporting people outside the St. John's in other ways as well. But there's ongoing discussions that would occur. As a province, we're looking at a number of options that we have available now to, to top up and support our business community and likewise for those within advanced education skills, trying to fill in the gaps. If there's anyone that finds himself in undue hardships, there are programs, within ongoing programs within the department that people can also avail of. So the message here for those that would find themselves in those difficult situations, give your department a call, give the department a call and see what programs are ongoingly available for you.
We've already been through one long weekend during this public health emergency with the Easter weekend last month, and at the time it was talked about as a critical weekend to get through, given the social interactions that would typically happen. situation upon us with the May 2-4 weekend. I'm wondering how you would assess the risk now with this upcoming long weekend compared to, I guess, then with the Easter weekend, taking into account now that we have the double bubbles in place, while also now having fewer active cases and 8 days in a row now of no new cases.
So I think you kind of answered your own question. The risk is the risk may be a little lower with regard to prevalence in the population, but we're moving more, we're interacting more, so that brings the risk up. So the bottom line with this is that you cannot assume that we do not have anything in our communities. You have to assume that the virus is out there. We do still have people coming into our province every day from elsewhere in Canada and elsewhere in the world occasionally. So we still do have that risk of importation, and people are being compliant with the isolation orders on the whole. However, there is still that risk that the virus could come in. So you have to take that into consideration, and you have to practice all those same guidance that we've been recommending all along. Physical distancing, washing your hands well, don't touch your face, stay home if you're sick. And certainly this weekend, it's as important as any other time, but our tendency is to want to congregate a little bit more in these holiday weekends, so we need to be a little extra careful in that regard for sure.
And one last quick informational question. The inconclusive case reported today, I'm wondering what date that would have been initially reported as a positive case for the first time.
I'm not sure of the exact date that it was reported. It was one of our more recent cases, though.
Thank you.
Our next questions are from Tyler Dunn of VOCM News. Please go ahead.
Tyler?
Please press star one at this time.
Are those returning from Carroll Lake and the Horizon work camps being automatically tested for COVID-19?
Yes, anyone who has returned from Carroll Lake or the Horizon camps are asked to contact 811, and from there they'll be directed for testing.
Okay. And what changes will happen to personal bubbles when we move into the next alert level?
So that question is still being considered. We will certainly let you know as soon as we have recommendations, but at this time we're still waiting to see the effects of the double bubble and the loosening of measures in level 4. And as we move a little further along into level 4, we'll develop some guidelines for interactions in level 3.
Okay, well, maybe I'm jumping a little ahead with this one as well, but I was wondering, are you guys thinking about any recommendations for traveling across the province and staying in places like hotels, again, for the next alert level?
These are things we are considering as we move through this, and that's part of the reason why this alert level has to be the length it is we need to have a thorough evaluation of what are the effects of the loosening of these measures have had on the virus in the province, and so as we get closer to level 3, we will certainly have those recommendations out there.
Then I'll ask closer to alert level 3. Thank you.
We will now move to a single line of questioning, starting with Kellyanne Roberts of NTV News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering, with the absence of a vaccine, I know this is similar to a question yesterday, but what does it look like for the province a year from now? Do we remain in level 2, level 1, until one may never come?
I guess it depends really on what COVID looks like in the world. It's hard for us to make that assessment right now. The COVID at the moment, it is we're seeing second waves in some places, so we do have to be cautious about any predictions that we're making because it is so new and evolving all the time. So, depending on what happens with the epidemiology of COVID, in Newfoundland, in Canada, in the United States, which is, that's a big influence for us. We have a lot of travel between the United States and Canada, and then with the rest of the world. So we can really, it's really too difficult to make that prediction right now, but certainly we know that if we don't have a vaccine, COVID will be with us, and we will have to find a way to live with COVID while reducing our risk as much as possible.
Thank you.
There is another thread, Kellyanne, in that there is research also into specific drug treatments for COVID-19 in the same way you can get antivirals for shingles or for cold sores and those kind of things. So that may offer some other ray of hope around possibilities into next year. Again, that's very speculative at the moment, but I know that is a thread of research too.
Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Our next question is from Peter Cowan of CBC News. Please go ahead.
Dr. Fitzgerald, a question about exemptions for funerals. We've talked to one woman who was allowed to come and attend a funeral, another woman who was told flat out no. So what criteria are you using to decide if someone has a loved one passed away and they want to come in from the rest of the country? And why are your staff not providing any specifics about why requests are being denied?
So the question about bereavement exemptions, so we do have some guidelines set aside for that. So if it's bereavement people, so people are permitted to come in for end of life. So if you have somebody who is close to the end of life, people are allowed to or will be granted an exemption to come in to provide care or to visit with them. But the isolation period still applies. People who are coming in for bereavement reasons, whether they have to provide support to family members after somebody dies, those are exemptions as well. However, the isolation criteria still applies. So if you come in, there is still a 14-day isolation period. That's the guidance around that particular exemption.
Our next question is from Marie Isabelle Rochon of Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
So yesterday, government announced it was expanding the testing criteria. Some other province has expanded those criteria weeks ago. I was just wondering, why did it took so long to expanding it here in Newfoundland and Labrador?
So we expanded our testing criteria several times. This latest expansion was to add several more symptoms that we would consider to be part of the COVID spectrum, and that those have come to light recently. And as we said, we are always reevaluating the evidence to decide if our symptom list should expand, and that's what we did. But the expansion, we've had several changes in our testing criteria since COVID became a reality for us here.
Our next question is from Holly Mackenzie-Suter of the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
I do apologize. You have disconnected.
Thank you. We'll move on to Andrew Robinson of the Telegram. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Sorry. With the devices for students needing to learn by distance in the NLESD system, I know there was a survey that went out to parents prior to the plans being set up for providing different devices as needed and internet access as needed. I know of at least one parent who's raised concerns about the survey not really delving into whether parents have the types of technology that are perhaps up to date or able to handle the kind of learning that's being offered, and also failing to take into account families with multiple children and parents working at home who need those devices in order now to work from home. current climate. I wonder, is there any way that families in these sorts of situations can reach out to the school district to try and see if arrangements can still be made for them?
So, Angie, you raise a very good question. This is the reason why the assessment and the engagement, occurred in the first place, is to find out where the gaps were. As I mentioned, the feedback that I've been given, the information that has come back to me is that nearly some 97% of the families were in a position to have the adequate equipment that was required for the students to have online education. So then it really comes down to, this is where the last mile and the last 3 or 4% that would need to be dealt with, and that was the purpose of the engagement, to see where we are. What our goal right now is, just in case that we find ourselves in a situation that in September, that the K-12 system cannot go back to an in-classroom type education format, well, then we're in a situation that we can respond to continuing the education home. So you raise a very good question. That was the purpose of the assessment in the beginning, to find out, the magnitude of the problem, to be able to support families and students to receive learning online, no matter what the location was, just in case we can't get back into our schools.
And our next question is from Tyler Dunn of VOCM News. Please go ahead.
A little bit of clarification on people traveling to their cabins and such this weekend. That's all permitted?
So we've asked people to stay in their bubble. We've asked people to stay close to home. And, you have to consider all of that. If you're thinking about going somewhere where you're not going to be able to stay within your bubble, or you're going to have lots of interactions, then you need to reconsider that, and to try to keep yourself and others as safe as possible.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for 2 quick questions. Please press star 1 and the operator will identify you.
Next question is from Kellyanne Roberts of NTV News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, my line cut out there, so I'm not sure if this was addressed. But in terms of the announcement today for education and the plan for September, what do you say to parents who need to go to work and are concerned if there's online learning, on how they're going to be able to balance that?
Well, this gives, this opportunity, or this gives us the opportunity to help support families. This is a very different world that we're living in. We're just 11 weeks into this, and every single process that will be put in place is not perfect yet. Will always be work to do. And for students and for parents that find themselves in a situation that they must go to work in September, many of them would have been working, as we're going through this situation that we're dealing with right now. So many of the same students that will find themselves, that parents that are working, that's exactly where they are right now. So it's important that we, take this time to put in place the necessary plans. We have to work with families. We have to work with our students. We have to work with, teachers and NLTA, along with the school districts, to do the best job that we can to be able to work with every single, situation that presents itself. But it's going to take all of us working together, to deal, just like it does to deal with the pandemic, just like it will to make sure we can put in place a proper education program in September.
Thank you.
And our final question today?
Yes, from Peter Cohen with CBC News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Is one of the scenarios you're looking at bringing classes back earlier in August? I know some other jurisdictions are looking at it as a possibility, considering the amount of lost time, both between Snowmageddon and the pandemic in this academic year.
Yeah, that's not a scenario that's has been shared with me yet, Peter. It's I think there's a number of options that they're looking at, but returning to school in August is not one that I've heard yet. But so I don't know of that being part of any scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The time for questions has ended. Please join us again on Tuesday, May 19th at 2 p.m., 1:30 in most of Labrador. Have a great May 2-4 weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.